Alright, so let's try to look at the a few questions from Algebra 2. So let's look at the first one. Find the exact value of cosine of A minus B for given pairs. So now, in this case, we end up getting cosine of 90 minus 60 degrees. Now, of course, we know that this one to be cosine of 30, so our answer should be at the end, radical 3 over 2. Well, let us try to do this one by applying the difference of the angle formula for cosine. What is the difference of the angle for the cosine? That is simply equal to cosine of 90 times cosine of 60 plus sine of 90 times sine of 60. Then here we end up getting cosine of 90 is in fact equal to 0, as we all know. So this portion becomes 0. Here, sine of 90 becomes 1, while sine of 60 becomes radical 3 over 2. So therefore our final answer becomes radical 3 over 2. Alright, let us move on to the second question. Find the exact value of cosine of 15 by using this one. So once again, A will be then cosine of 45 times cosine of 30 plus sine of 45 and sine of 30. Now cosine of 45 becomes radical 2 over 2, while cosine of 30 becomes radical 3 over 2 plus sine of 45 becomes radical 2 over 2 and sine of 30 is 1/2. Then our final answer becomes radical 6 plus radical 2 all over 4. That becomes our answer. How about B? Use the value from here, which we already have done, and then they want us to find the cosine of 165 in this manner. Then we end up getting cosine of 180 times cosine of 15 degrees plus sine of 180 times sine of 15 degrees. Now, as we know, sine of 180 is in fact equal to 0. So this portion becomes 0. So the only thing that's left here is this. Cosine of 180 in fact becomes negative 1. Sine of 15, which we calculated earlier, radical 6 plus radical 2 over 4 plus 0. Now this simply becomes negative radical 6 minus radical 2 over 4. That becomes our final answer. Number C. Use the value which we already calculated from part A to find the next value here. We get to realize cosine of 360 times cosine of 15 plus sine of 360 plus times sine of 15 degrees. Here then we get to realize sine of 360 is equal to 0. So here we have cosine of 360 is equal to 1. Therefore this becomes 1 times radical 6 plus radical 2 over 4, which is equal to simply radical 6 plus radical 2 over 4. That becomes our answer. How about D? Now use cosine of A as a cofunction. Find the exact value of sine of 75. Since cosine of 15 degrees is in fact equal to sine of 75 degrees, all we have to just do is the right of the cosine of 15 once again, which is radical 6 plus radical 2 over 4. Okay, let's move on to the next question. In this case, A is 270 and B is 60. Then in this case, we get to realize cosine of 270 and cosine of 60. Now, in case of cosine, sum of the angle actually has the subtraction in the middle. And we have sine of 270 and sine of 60. Now, we get to realize that cosine of 270 in fact is equal to 0. So here we have negative. Sine of 270 is in fact equal to negative 1. And sine of 60 is radical 3 over 2. which is equal to radical 3 over 2. Alright, so let us look into this question together. Find the exact value of cosine of 75. Then in this case, A will be equal to cosine of 45 times cosine of 30 minus, remember the opposite sign for cosine, and then sine of 45 times sine of 30. Here we have radical 2 over 3, 2 over 2 times radical 3 over 2 minus this, the other becomes radical 2 over 2 times 1/2. So our final answer becomes radical 6 minus radical 2 over 4. That's what we end up getting for A. How about B? Using that value, we want to figure out this one. Then we have cosine of 180 times cosine of 75, which we calculated earlier, minus sine of 180 times sine of 75. But we get to realize that this portion is equal to 0, because sine of 180 is in fact equal to 0. So here we have cosine of 180 is negative 1 times radical 6 minus radical 2 over 4. This basically means we have radical 2 minus radical 6 over 4 becomes our answer. Choice C. You see sine of 15, that's what we're looking for. In fact, that is equal to cosine of 75 degrees by the cofunction here. But that is something that which we calculated earlier, so we have radical 6 minus radical 2 over 4 becomes our answer. Alright, let's look at the sign. In case of sine, sine of A minus B in fact is equal to sine of A cosine of B minus sine of B times cosine of A. That's basically what we're looking at. In case of addition, all we have to do is addition in the middle. Alright, so then let us try to look at the first section. We end up having sine of 90 times cosine of 60. Now it's going to be minus cosine of 90 and sine of 60. Now here we have sine of 90 is equal to 1, while cosine of 60 is equal to 1/2. So 1 times 1/2, where cosine of 90 is equal to 0. So that's what we have, which is equal to 1/2 as the answer. How about the second one? Same thing, sine of 90 cosine of 60 plus sum of the angle. In case of sine, we have to keep the sign as they are. So cosine of 90 and then sine of 60. And in fact, interestingly, in this case, either way, we're going to get 1/2. Now, so we got to do it this way. In case of sine, A, what we end up getting is sine of 45 times cosine of 30 minus sine of 30 and cosine of 45. How'd you calculate this one? Then this becomes radical 2 over 2 times radical 3 over 2 minus, here we end up getting 1/2 times radical 2 over 2, which is equal to radical 6 minus 2, or radical 2 rather, divided by 4. That becomes our answer. Sine of 165. Sine of 165 in this manner, we can have sine of 180 times cosine of 15 minus, in case of sine we have same expression, same sign in the middle, and then cosine of 180 and times sine of 15. Now, here we have sine of 180 is equal to 0, so this portion becomes 0. So what we end up having is negative 1 times cosine of 180 is in fact also negative 1. Sine of 15 is something that which we calculated, which is radical 6 minus radical 2 all over 4. But these two negatives cancels out. We end up having same answer as the previous one. Part C, use the value of this given and then do that. So we have sine of 360 minus times cosine of 15 minus, we end up getting cosine of 360 times sine of 15. What do we end up getting? Sine of 360 becomes 0. So here we have cosine of 360 is also equal to is equal to positive 1. So we have negative 1 times positive 1. And sine of 15 was already solved earlier. Radical 6 minus radical 2 over 4, which simplifies into radical 2 minus radical 6 over 4 becomes our answer. Now, part D, 180 and 19, but we are adding, so we end up getting sine of 180 times cosine of 15 and plus cosine of 180 and sine of 15. Now, here we have sine of 180 becomes 0 once again. Then we have cosine of 180 is negative 1 times the previous one here, radical 6 minus radical 2 over 4. But we just realized that this is identical to this one. Alright, that's it. Have a nice day. Bye.